Initially, we wanted to make a video about how likely it was that Belarus would invade Ukraine. Fortunately, after the successful Ukrainian offensive, the question of Belarus entering the war has lost its relevance. Nevertheless, the importance of this country in the Russia-Ukraine war and its impact on the region should not be underestimated. These countries' 31 year of independence can be described in one word, and that is Lukashenko, a dictator, a populist, a counter-reformer, a man who came to power thanks to democracy and buried it, the only president of the Republic of Belarus for all the time of its independence. Lukashenko was born in the township of Kopis in the Belarusian Soviet Socialist Republic. This is part of the USSR, and grew up without a father. He was his mother's only child. The family lived in a village in the Mogilev region. As Lukashenko himself recalls, he had to work hard, chopping wood, moving grass, and even milking cows. Nevertheless, he graduated from Pedagogical Institute as a historian. But not everything was that smooth. After graduation, Lukashenko often changed his jobs. Many times, the reason was conflicts with his superiors and irascibility. Therefore, there was no special career development in his young years. On the contrary, he held many minor party positions. During Perestroika, Lukashenko entered big politics and drew his lucky ticket. This choice became crucial in his life and the life of all of the country. Already in 1990, he was elected to the Parliament of Belarus. What do we know about the beginning of his career? In the first years, the future president actively criticized the communists for their dictatorship, arrogance, and deceit. Determining his political position, he did not classify himself either as a leftist or a rightist. The author of the book, Alexander Lukashenko, A Political Portrait, Valery Ivanovich Korbalevich, gives a very vivid description of his then views. His democratic convictions were a tribute to political fashion and nothing more. More precisely, he does not have any principles and beliefs at all, if he easily gives up his former views under the influence of public sentiment. While liberals had a clear-cut position on reforms and changing in the government, Lukashenko was strolling from topic to topic. However, it is hard to blame the man whose career directly depends on the opinion of the citizens. Today's dictator actively supported the Democrats in the past. Then he came on a wave of change, and change was his middle name. But the winds of change blow unexpectedly. With the collapse of communism, the standard of living collapsed and the number of those dissatisfied with market reforms grew. At this point, Lukashenko makes U-turn and blames his past allies, the liberals. By actively speculating on social problems, he quickly gained popularity and eventually became president of Belarus in 1994. Upon taking his coveted position, Lukashenko began to destroy everything he could gain power with, the independent media and the opposition. However, already then the political faces the consequences of his unscrupulousness. The West does not trust the young president and sees Lukashenko as an opponent of reforms, refusing the country loans. In this situation, the dictator cooperates with Moscow and raises the issue of unification with Russia in exchange for the Kremlin to write off his loans. Then, his move does not bring the desired result. The government was much more concerned with market reforms than with annexation. By the way, the idea of a union state was the next step in Lukashenko's career. Having united Belarus and Russia, he dreamed of becoming the head of a new union, again the background of the weakening president of Russia, Boris Yeltsin. Lukashenko was quite promising and popular with those who were nostalgic about the collapse of the USSR. But the idea failed. With each subsequent year, the dictatorship in Belarus has been strengthening, and in his quest for power, Lukashenko is not afraid to resort to even the most radical actions. Krasovsky, Zakharchenko, Gonchar, the Russian opposition leaders start disappearing. The president resolved his disagreements with the parliament by means of a nationwide referendum, and Lukashenko subordinates all state institutions to himself. In 2004, he repeated his previous experience, but this time he deprived himself of limits on the number of terms in office. Democracy in Belarus died before it learned to walk. Let us now speak of foreign policy. Of course, it is impossible to judge a person's entire policy by a single episode, but this case is very eloquent. To begin with, once Alexander Grigorievich Lukashenko wanted to visit the Winter Olympics in 1998, which were then held in Japan. But there is just one problem. The visit of a head of state can only be carried out with the permission of the host country. And then, the night before the visit, Ambassador Kravchenko gets a phone call. President Lukashenko's visit has to be arranged tomorrow. Then Belarusian ambassador to Japan, Kravchenko recalls that when he applied to the Japanese Foreign Ministry, the answer was there cannot be a visit because there is no invitation, and Lukashenko had already left. Events developed quite rapidly. The Belarusian ambassador called the Russian ambassador in Japan. In an hour, the Russian Foreign Ministry already knows about Lukashenko's visit. Meanwhile, the Russian General Staff organized a special military operation providing an air corridor, and Russian diplomats agreed with the Japanese on the purpose of the visit. Lukashenko was supposed to visit the country at the head of the Belarusian Olympic Committee, and all is this to watch bloody hockey. And this wasn't the only such occasion. Lukashenko liked to reveal details of secret negotiations with other heads of state, showed familiarity and dragged his youngest son, Kolinka, to all the world leaders. Because of the leaders' insensitivity, Belarus found itself in international isolation. Nevertheless, Lukashenko actively managed to flirt with Moscow, selling him the idea of future union in exchange for loans. Then Putin had already become president and Russia took the path of dictatorship. In 2008, after the Russian-Georgian War, the conflict between Russia and the West escalated. Lukashenko chooses the policy of maneuvering and this brings results. Loans come both from the East and from the West. In 2014, the dictator managed to grab another gift of fate. The Belarusian leader acts as a mediator in the conflict between Kiev and Moscow. Belarus is talked about all over the world, and finally, in a positive way. Agreements on a ceasefire and withdrawal of troops are being signed in Minsk. By the way, we have a separate video about these events on our channel. But on August 9, 2020, protests erupted in Belarus. The reason was the result of another rigged presidential election in which, what a surprise, Lukashenko won for the sixth time. This time it was especially hard to believe in the dictator's victory, and people went to rallies. Lukashenko had to resort to suppressing mass dissenting actions. This could not please Western countries. A number of EU countries, as well as Ukraine, Great Britain, and the United States of America, did not recognize Lukashenko's legitimacy and imposed sanctions on the Belarusian authorities. This stopped the two-front game, and the Belarusian dictator turned to Moscow for help in crushing the protests. From then on, Belarus became more and more dependent on Moscow. By the beginning of the invasion of Ukraine, the territory of Belarus had already been actively used by the Russian military. Missiles, aviation, and convoys of equipment were flying in from there. Lukashenko spoke about the war more than once, and as a sophisticated politician each time he left room for maneuvering. Despite the fact that Belarus is fully occupied by Russian soldiers, the leadership still has some sovereignty. Before Russia's failure was not so obvious, there was an ongoing debate as to whether Belarusian troops would invade Ukrainian territory. But such a formulation of the question seems quite incorrect to us. The question is, did Lukashenko benefit from invading Ukraine? The United States President Kennedy, commenting on the failed US landing in Cuba, said, "Victory has 1,000 fathers, but defeat always is an orphan." Russian troops are now engaged in heavy positional fighting in the Donbass, and these battles are unlikely to turn into a victory for Putin's regime. No one likes protracted and bloody conflicts, and this war is no exception. Taking Ukraine seems like an irrational decision. It would prolong the conflict, lead to death, raise the stakes, but it would not change the situation. But what about the Kremlin? Can it force the Belarusian president to change his position? For Putin, the status quo with Belarus does not look like a loss either. The Belarusian card, on the one hand, may try to cut supply routes from western Ukraine and open a second front, but on the other hand, it also may lead to further acts of defiance and escalate the conflict. In such a scenario, events could turn out to be a major setback. Protests, clash of citizens with the police, civil war, and Lukashenko's flight to Russia. Moscow might want to benefit from Lukashenko's invasion of Ukraine, but it is certainly not ready to tolerate the risks of this adventure. Regardless, Belarus is firmly associated with Russia's ally, and from now on the way to the west is definitely closed for Lukashenko. A man who is used to acting in one way never changes. He must come to ruin when the times in changing are no longer in harmony with his ways. We are quoting Niccolo Machiavelli for a reason. For many people, it is the standard of pragmatic politics, but it is not always unprincipled that leads to victory. Of course, Lukashenko is not a politician from Machiavelli's books, but he is the Belarusian dictator who quite tried to imitate him. Lukashenko came to power on a wave of changes. He was young, ambitious, and goal-oriented. His unscrupulousness, pragmatism, and cynicism were effective, but each time they undermined his credibility, narrowing the window of opportunity. What is the use of choosing the best option in the end if you have to choose between the worst and the worst? However, despite his good political instincts, Lukashenko repeatedly made mistakes for which the entire country had to pay. For example, a politician whose name was synonymous with change became synonymous with the word state and refused to change anything. Former allies, opposition, and independent mass media became disgraced. The opinion of the people was silenced under the blows of police, and soon the country was dragged against its will into the largest European conflict of the 21st century. Dear viewers, thank you for watching this video. Please share your opinion in the comments below and donate to the Ukrainian Armed Forces in the link below as well. Слава Україні! Героям слава!